Okay, we have Apex Chess versus Jan. Whoever wins this game gets $25. This is the Caro Khan defense fantasy variation. Obviously, Jan has two pawns in the center, but now Apex strikes, taking on d4. Jan develops his light squared bishop, and now Apex develops his knight to d7. So Jan could have took the pawn on d4, but he decides to just develop his pieces and try and get a more active position and try and put as much pressure as he can on Apex's f7 square. What Jan's thinking about right now is to probably sacrifice his bishop on f7, but it's actually a little bit too early. And I think castling kingside is a good move, or maybe taking on d4, but he decides to castle kingside, trying to make sure his rook is putting a lot of pressure on the f7 square. Apex just develops his knight. That looks like a good move, trying to get ready to castle kingside in the future. There is one drawback to that move, and that's e5. If Jan were to push e5 attacking Apex's knight, which is what he's played, he would then have to move his knight to d5. And Apex's position looks kind of weak, but the computer says it's completely fine. So Jan has many moves here. He could take back on d4, but he decides to give up a pawn on e6, trying to weaken Apex's position. The computer doesn't like that move, but I actually think that is a pretty aggressive move and could benefit Jan in the future because it does weaken Apex's king. I'm not sure if Apex has any other moves than taking. It looks like taking the pawn back is his only move, and that's what he's played. So his king is a little weak. I'm not sure what Jan is going to play now. He could take back on d4 because he is down 2 pawns, but his position does look very active. He could maybe develop his bishop to g5, but maybe not, because then Apex could probably block with his bishop. So maybe moving the knight to g5, maybe taking the pawn on d4. There's many moves in this position for Jan. If Jan were to take on d4, he would be threatening. Oh, and okay, he does. He takes on d4, and now he is threatening queen h5 check. So I think Apex has to move his knight back to f6 to stop the queen from having the h5 check. Apex's position looks incredibly hard to play, but he seems to be dancing. So I think I don't know, maybe he's just really comfortable with this position. But if I were to be playing from his side, I would be very uncomfortable because his position just looks terrible. But the computer says it's fine. I'm really surprised by that. He's actually better. That is incredible. His position looks terrible, but wow, he's just dancing over there. So if Apex Chess were to move his knight back to f6, stopping the queen check, potentially in the future there could be a rook sacrifice. Okay, for example, he moves his knight back, stopping the queen check. But if you were to sacrifice the rook on f6 now, the other knight could just take, and so that doesn't work. So maybe taking on d5 could be a good move, like taking his knight. It's hard to say. Maybe just developing the pieces for Jan is the best move. Maybe even moving his king over, trying to make sure that his king is safe. There's so many moves he could play. Maybe moving his rook to e1, but probably just developing his pieces would be the best moves. Okay, he develops his bishop to g5. I think that's a great move. I'm not sure what Apex is going to play. Maybe moving his bishop to e7, but he has to be incredibly careful right now because Jan's threatening to take his knight and potentially have the check on h5. Okay, Apex Chess is definitely thinking now. If I were him, I would be extremely careful, but he moves his queen to b6, putting some pressure on the d4 knight, also pinning the d4 knight because the king is on g1. But his position does look very questionable because you could take on d5, and obviously if he takes back with the knight, then you have the check, and if he takes with the pawns, then the pawn structure becomes incredibly weak. He'd probably have to take with the c6 pawn, and then the e6 pawn would just look incredibly weak. So, but Jan moves his king over. Okay, the computer hates that move, but I definitely understand the point of that. He wants to make sure that his knight is able to move and that the king is safe. He definitely had something better there, but that looks like a very reasonable move. Yeah, there definitely could be some type of rook sacrifice on f6 in the future for Jan. If Jan were to take Apex's knight on f6 and then Apex takes back with the knight, Jan could sacrifice his rook on f6. The pawn takes back, queen to h5 check, and there could be some serious problems within Apex's position. So Apex is thinking right now, obviously, he wants to get his king to safety, so developing his bishop potentially, but he has to be incredibly careful. But he decides to develop his bishop to d7. So if Jan were to take on d5, and he does, that looks like there could be some serious threats, because if Apex takes back with the knight, then there's the queen h5 check, and if he takes with the pawns, then the pawn structure become incredibly weak. So I'm not sure. I want to say taking with the pawn would be the best move. Yeah, if you take with the e6 pawn, then the king becomes weak, and if you take with the c6 pawn, then the e6 pawn would be backwards. But he takes with the pawn. Now the king is out in the open, so maybe rook to e1 potentially could be a good move, or maybe just taking the knight, pawn takes, and then queen check. Yeah, so the computer is suggesting to sacrifice the rook on f6, taking the knight, the pawn takes back, and then queen check. And apparently having the bishop is more important than the rook in that position. But it's incredibly difficult for them to spot it. He's probably thinking about it though, but he decides to take with the bishop. But yeah, like I said, the taking with the rook was actually a lot better. But this is the kind of the same idea. He now has the queen check, and now Apex Chess, he has to move his king because he can't block, so he'll lose castling rights. But the computer actually likes Apex's position even more, even though he loses castling rights. So that's very interesting. But yeah, Jan has to be a little careful. His knight is hanging, so probably moving his knight, or maybe defending his knight. Yeah, it looks like moving his queen to h4, threatening to take that pawn on f6, but also defending his knight at the same time. That looks like a good move. Okay, Jan moves his queen to h4, defending his knight, but also threatening to take on f6 with check. So Apex needs to probably defend that, so probably moving his dark squared bishop to e7, defending the pawn. And then Jan should probably develop his knight that's on b1 so that the rooks are connected, because you don't want the rooks to not be connected and then potentially lose to some type of tactic in the future. Okay, Apex Chess moves his bishop to e7, defending the pawn. So without a doubt, Jan needs to develop his knight. Even though it hangs a pawn on b2, it's much better for him just to develop his pieces. Even though he's already down a pawn, I think just developing his knight to d2 would be a strong move. So Jan is still thinking. He definitely doesn't want Apex Chess to take the pawn on b2, so he pushes b3. The computer hates that move. I understand it though. He just doesn't want the queen to infiltrate his position, but it's incredibly weak to leave the rooks not connected and the knight on b1 not developed. Apex Chess moves his king. That looks like a really nice move, trying to get his other rook into the game. If I were Jan, I would develop my knight to d2 before it's too late, because the rooks need to be connected. But he gives a check instead, trying to it looks like he's trying to win a pawn on f6, but that's a huge blunder, because a rook to f8 attacking the queen, you can't move your queen, because then you would hang mate. So the only move now is for him to sacrifice, I think, his knight on e6, bishop takes, and then queen to g7 check, bishop blocks, and then moving his rook. But it looks like the game is just completely over, and now Jan realizes that the game is completely over. He needed to develop his knight because now his position is just way too weak. Okay, he sacrifices his knight. I think that was the best move. Bishop takes, check, because he needs to move his queen out of the way. And then it looks like bishop blocks, kind of just looks like an excellent move here. You wouldn't want to move your king back. Okay, Apex Chess moves his bishop back to d7, and now Jan should probably just develop his knight. He's also low on time, so he has to play a lot faster. Okay, he develops his knight. So Apex Chess could easily just take the rook, try and trade off some material, but maybe trading material when it's safe to do so. And Apex Chess should definitely be able to win this game. I like how Apex Chess is just thinking, trying to find like what is the best move. Maybe moving his rook. Okay, well I was thinking the other rook, but he moves that rook, and then Apex takes, and then he has to take back. And now the bishop is now attacking the queen and the knight at the same time. So that looks like a huge problem for for Jan, he also only has 13 seconds, so definitely moving the queen. But that's actually a really good move, because if you were to take the knight, then you could take the queen. But Apex will definitely spot that and just take with the queen. So now Jan only has 10 seconds. He tries to just push some pawns in front of his king. There's not really much he can do now. There's really nothing he can do, especially with such low time. Now he has to move his king because of the mate on h2. Okay, he moves his rook threatening mate. It looks like he has to move the rook up to defend mate, but it looks like he just ran out on time. And now Apex just wins, and Jan is not happy. Thank you Apex Chess and Jan for helping me make this video. If you guys want to check out their channels, their links are in the description. And if you want to be featured in one of these videos, you can message me on chess.com. Thanks.